Darcy, you're someone that doesn't really need an introduction, obviously, because you've been all around the basketball community. And you want to know something really crazy?
Tell
I've
me.
now known you for half my life.
That is crazy. I cannot say the same for you, unfortunately. Or
Well,
fortunately, I don't know which one.
hence the point of this podcast. But you've been involved coaching with CMU. You've done 3-on-3, you've done all these things, and now you've kind of moved into this like nomadic lifestyle. What we were talking about just before we started recording, what made you decide that you wanted to intentionally live like a nomad?
Man, that's a wow. We're going.
We're going
I,
right in.
I don't think I've thought about that for a long time, but I think it was after. So I got to work for FIBA 3x3 in 2018. Actually, when I was playing, first I was playing on the 3x3 World Tour, but I'd made a comeback already. I was already like later in my days of playing. And at
Mhm.
that point, I was like, I think, and I was working as the executive director of Winnipeg Minor Basketball. And at that point, I was like, what's the better route here? Is like get into this as an organizer, which I already do, or like keep playing. Obviously, I got into it as an organizer and I volunteered and they hired me and I quit my job in Winnipeg. And for 2018, for about 8 or 9 months, I literally went around the globe like 5 times. It was crazy. Like Google Maps told me, it's like you traveled the globe like 5 times. But I went to so many different countries and just got to like, there for a short period of time. But the difference was I actually got to work with the locals because we were putting on events. So
Mhm.
there was a certain level of integration. I wasn't just there as a tourist, I was working. And so, you go as a tourist is one way. You go visit people that you might know in a different country. That's the best way. And then this was kind of like some kind of intermediary. And through that, I was like, this is amazing, right? And so from that point, I actually worked for them only for 1 year, didn't get my visa. I was supposed to move to Spain and then continue to do this. Wasn't able to get a visa. And so from that point, I actually just went private. Like I did what I was kind of doing with them, but as a private consultant, and I was, got a chance to kind of get a taste of that. But that wasn't the initial reason. So what happened, which was probably like the story of so many people now, is the pandemic happened. So I just finished up a contract in LA, working with the LA Times, and I was kind of like, this is amazing. Things are going so great. And obviously the pandemic happens. But right before the pandemic happened, my cousin said, come to Costa Rica. Come check it out, right? Like it's awesome. Been living down here forever, and I was almost went, but I was like, oh, you know what? There could be more opportunities, blah blah blah. And I stayed in Canada, and I got stuck in Canada, and I have very few regrets. One of them is that I'm so close to being fluent in French, and I just stop practicing, and then I get shitty again.
Mhm.
That's one that I'll probably on my deathbed be like, you idiot. And then the second one, it was this is like I didn't go and I was stuck here. And so the moment that like stuff started opening up, I got another contract and I got rid of all of my stuff and I got the F out. I was in Vancouver at the time. I got the F out. I went to Costa Rica. So that's that's what started it all. And then from that point, I've just been focusing all my energy on making sure that I could set my life up that way, obviously financial standpoint, but logistically as well.
Man, I know that a lot of people talk about like the digital nomad life and oh, working from your laptop and all this shit, but like I sometimes think that people don't actually understand what goes into it. And I know that we've had this conversation before where you say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you think you're just chilling on the beach in the Canary Islands." Like, dog, you actually have to be paying attention to way more things than when you're just living in River Heights in Winnipeg
Yes.
with the average job, average life, the whole automated average Winnipegger script. You know what I mean?
There you go. There you go. And I would say that just for anywhere that you're like settled, because the amount of messages I would get, obviously when it's dead of winter in Canada and I'm posting pictures on the beach, people are like, it must be nice, it must be nice. And I would always be like, yeah, it's nice, right? But every once in a while, people say, I wish I could do that. And I say, you can. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I said, and they'll go on and say, oh, I have this, I have this, I have this. And I say, yeah, I know, but that's the thing you have to understand is there's a cost to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you have the comfort and the consistency when you live in Winnipeg or anywhere. where it's like, this is my home country and I have a job, I get on the bus or I drive, I get on the train, I go to work, I come home. There's consistency there, right? And so that's what your benefit, right? The cost is that sometimes you feel trapped, right? You feel stressed, you don't have variety, you're not meeting any new people, right? So everything's just in life is a trade-off, and you have to decide kind of what you want. So yeah, I've had so many interactions with people online. Then it must be nice, living the dream, all that stuff. But it comes at a sacrifice. You're moving all the time, right? So you really have to be built for it. And then just understand that like there is going to be a sacrifice, right? I don't get to see my friends all the time. Like that's a huge sacrifice, right? Like friends, family, you're not around them all the time. That's the price you pay for sure.
And I think one of the things that oftentimes is actually difficult for people who are talking to you, maybe if they're your age and have a lot of kids or a big family, or they're married and have a house, like you can't just dip on the mortgage and be like, you know what, I'm just going to sell my shit. See you later. Hey kids, guess what? Just go get jobs, worry about yourself. Or, hey honey, I'll be back in 6 to 8 months, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
True. That's exactly it. You know, it's funny. I met I think if it's a young couple, you can do it. So I met a few young married couples and they had their babies, like newborn babies with them. That was, interesting. So I had tons of questions from them. I was like, what's going on? Like, why are you doing this? Just like, like we want to start a family, we want to travel. So here we are. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think people, people your age and younger, we have a unique, we're in a unique, like I would say, time in that you have plenty of different options of the way you want to live your life, and you don't just have to go that route. Like, hey, let's get the house as quickly as possible and let's do this. I mean, not only is it way harder to do that now, but it's not even necessarily like something that you have to do. Before you have to do that. Why? What else would you do? Like, oh, I'm gonna leave and go do this somewhere else in another place, right? But the idea of living nomadic is something that you can decide to do it when you're younger. You can do this lifestyle and still plan to buy property. You can do that. I think I've met people who are, I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica, buy property in Costa Rica, right? Like they've built houses and little casitas and they're renting them out and they live in them, and those are options that you can do. But yeah, to your point, like it's not for everyone, but you can decide when you're younger if it's something you want to do. You have to really like plan to do it. Like, I'm going to do this. You have a family and 3 kids and they're going to school. Like, I mean, hold on. That said, man, I met an entire family, shout out, from Winnipeg, who moved down to Costa Rica, brought their kids and everything. So, I mean, they're not living a nomadic life, but I mean, they left Canada.
It's possible. I mean, I think a group of people that are close to me that, again, not a lot of people really are aware of, Azorean people have been on this wave for a long time, man. Portuguese people, a lot in the continent, they would go and they moved to Canada, but especially in the Azores, it's the smallest group of islands in Portugal. Madeira is where Ronaldo's from, and that's where everyone thinks of when they hear of other than Portugal besides Spain. And as long as I can remember, my grandparents would always talk about your house, especially growing up between the 20s and 60s. Life was like impossible mode for people who were in the Azores. Absolutely impossible. The First and Second World War ravaged the quality of life for people there an insane amount. And so owning a house was even more sacred to them than millennials trying to buy a house now. And so when they wanted to move to Canada or pursue better opportunities, they would kind of have these be at a crossroads like you are, where you're like, well, but except they own a house, or like, I own a property. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to sell this thing? Like, I worked so hard and my grandparents went through all this stuff. And so they would just keep it.
Yeah.
And so before Airbnb existed, like every single rental property outside of hotels was all just people whose family hadn't lived in the Azores forever, but they just decided, why are we going to get rid of this house?
Yeah.
We can just rent it to people and we can do this again and again. And so there's this common joke amongst Portuguese people. Actually, it was in a music video done by this group of YouTubers who have become popular over the last like 10 years now, called the Portuguese Kids. And they did a remix of I'm Sexy and I Know It. So the line was, I work second shift 7 days a week. I own a single family house and 3 rental properties. And honestly, like it's so underrated to have that dual citizenship or be from another country or when you decide to move, if anything, you talk about that family from Winnipeg. I think that is almost something I would encourage people to do. If you're from Canada, or
Mm,
if you can have some heritage or find some way to get citizenship in another country, it opens up an insane amount of borders for you. And you should absolutely do it. You should have done it
100%.
yesterday. The next best time is today. Like, go to the
Yeah.
local consulate, go to Toronto, Montreal, wherever it is, get your second passport and go explore that country, look at what it takes to buy a house, all those things. Cause then you can actually be Mr. or Mrs. Worldwide,
Yeah.
um, without, like, there's not as many difficulties.
100%. 100%. That's that flexibility. I know a buddy of mine, he's getting his German passport. Once you have a German like he's gonna be like a thing, he can get his, then he can go through the EU. Like then he's like all those countries, he's like, yeah, I'm good. It's like that's crazy, right? Like so many countries, and this guy's gonna have access to all of them as a result of that. So it's that flexibility. And the cool thing I think I love about what you're saying is if you have that flexibility, like obviously things aren't like things things fluctuate, right? Whether those be cultures, economies. And so if you're in a position to like move around into the place that's better suited for what you're trying to do at that time in your life, it's a win, right? At the end of the day. More importantly, if you're in a place where you can leave Canada in the winter, come on. That's an absolute win every time. I don't care. No one can tell me otherwise. I don't care how much you like, cross country skiing or skating on a river. Get out of here with that.
When you see the beach in Costa Rica and see all your thirst trap stories between the months of November and March, like, people will start changing their mind real quick.
Exactly. That's what hey, it must be nice. I'm like, it is.
Yeah, it
Yeah, it's
is. You can do
wonderful.
it too. Like, you just,
Yeah, exactly.
whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. That's exactly it. I think
Yeah.
most people just don't want to take the like it's a risk, you know. And the other thing I'll say too is like you had mentioned like, oh, I like give up all my stuff. That's a big mentality shift. Like I read some books on minimalist style and life and what it's really about. It's not just about getting rid of everything. There's levels to it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of it's more of a mindset and philosophy or an ideology or whatever. I'm not sure which one it is, but definitely a mindset. And but most people want stuff. They're not gonna give stuff up. They just want so much stuff. They want to carry it with them. They want to have it. And like I literally have like I travel so light. People look at me like that's all you brought. I'm like, yeah, the hell. But I'm a simple person, right? So that's another thing. Like, it doesn't work for everyone because they want to travel with massive suitcases and then they're gonna like bounce around country to country with it. I'm like, good luck. You can do it, but it's not fun. I'll tell you that much. I've seen people do it. It's not fun.
A lot of people I hear complain about, oh my God, I'm never going to fly again because of COVID. I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, because you're going to get your luggage lost and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait a second. Why the fuck do you need to be carrying around 6 luggages and the kitchen sink everywhere you go?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly it. That's people. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. That's like there's a cost to it, right? And if I don't want to have the option to wear 5 pairs of shoes, well, like that's not a nomadic lifestyle. You can't bring 5, 6, 7, 8 pairs of shoes with you. I mean, you can, but like, good luck. Like, you're not gonna have fun. Like, anytime you have to move, it's gonna be hell because that means you're gonna have huge bags and, like you just said, so it's again, it is really very much a mindset and a decision to decide what you value in life. And so, typically, when you live this lifestyle, you obviously meet other people like this, and everyone's a similar mindset. They tend to travel lighter or they value different things, obviously, than most people. And I think a lot of people value some of the same things that I do. It's like I'm not so different, but I think they may have not been exposed to some of these ideas, or they may not have experienced it. Like I said, I told you why I started doing this. I got to travel the world in 2018, essentially being a nomad for my job. I didn't get to choose where I went, but still, and that gave me the like, oh, I had traveled before that. Don't get me wrong, but this was like true. Like, I'm going all over the place, and then that's what kind of opened my eyes. Like, I would love to do this you know for my life, not just for this year. I want to continue to do this, right? And so I think if people experience that, then they'd be more willing to like, oh, I can get rid of all this stuff. I don't need it, right? Because I'm gonna go have experiences instead.
Well, 2 quotes come to mind when you talk about having all this stuff and traveling versus owning materials. And I know that it's not the first time that this quote was said. I'm sure that the Stoics said it a million times, but when you start to own so many, like, and I think it's in Fight Club, Tyler Durden says, when you start to own so many things, and eventually your things start to own you.
Yes, man. Oh, that is a fire quote. What's the second one? I thought you had
Um,
two. You said two.
oh yeah. But it was yeah, and just experiences over things.
Yes, yes. The man, the own things owning you thing is so true. Not even just
It's
from a
crazy,
standpoint
man.
of like if you live somewhere and have a car, like you pay for it, but then like it's like you have the car, blah blah. Blah. But like even more so, like I remember the first time I moved out. I had check this out. So like I used to live in like a 3 bedroom apartment. Um, I mean like yeah, I lived in a 3 bedroom. Now I used to like host international students. So, okay, so I rented out one of my rooms. But point being, I had so much stuff. I had multiple TVs and all this. And then when I slowly started to like, minimalize my life, I'm getting rid of all this stuff. And I cannot tell you how good it felt to get rid of everything. Like I felt like a new person. And now, you just naturally collect stuff,
Of
especially
course. Oh
like,
yeah, of course.
especially like stuff like this. I just get it because of the basketball stuff. I give away a bag, 2 massive bags of stuff. I just give it away all the time just to like get rid of stuff. And it always feels good. The less stuff I have, the better I feel. It's just because you don't have to worry about anything. You're not worrying. That was a big part of the minimalist thing. It's like you don't have to, there's nothing cluttering your mind because you don't have anything. So you can just focus on other stuff, right? Like you're not like worried, oh, where's this? What's that? Where'd that thing? So yeah, it is, I think, I think more and more people are doing it, but I implore people to just try it, right? Get rid of stuff that's in your closet that you haven't worn. If you have shoes, get rid of them. Just even that. Like that's why people feel so good after spring cleaning, right? They get rid of a bunch of stuff. Like, oh, it feels so good. It's a new start.
I mean, I'm going back to Winnipeg today, and I've actually felt like extreme anxiety 2 days ago about like I was thinking of buying some new Lululemon stuff because being an employee in the discount, and I'm like, like I've used hand-me-down shorts from my dad and from
Yeah.
people who don't use them anymore. And I was like, okay, before I buy this stuff, I need to make sure I have a plan when I go back to Winnipeg, go to my parents' house, go through the entire duffel bag of clothing I didn't even bring
Yeah.
with me here to Regina, and then donate it or go to Plato's Closet, whatever, sell it, because
Hmm.
I own not that much stuff to begin with, especially for like the average guy or whatever 27-year-old. But there's still times where I feel like, man, if I acquire two or three more things, I'm just gonna have to start getting rid of things. Like I need a cap, and then it just
Yes.
cycle through. Like you can only
Yes.
own this much stuff. The second you want to get more stuff, you have to get rid of things
Yeah.
first, so that
100%.
like okay, yeah, like I understand the thing about having a car, for example. Okay, if you live in Winnipeg, then you're going to be
You
there
need a car.
permanently.
Yeah,
You probably need a car. The value it brings you is going to save you time, which is
for
important,
sure.
right? Or if you live in a really big apartment, you're going to need a bed, or you can have a kitchen table, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Sure. But when I thought about when I move out here at my place in Regina, I'm like, I'm not married to this table or to this couch or any of these things. Like if I need to sell them for it to make it easier for me to move or to go places, I'll do it. But
Yes.
that's the reason why I felt a lot of anxiety around buying them in the first place. Cause I'm like, well,
Mm.
the way that I've lived my life similar to yours, like you never know where you're going to live next. And then, oh, my parents would always say to me, just buy a brand new bed and you'll take it with you everywhere. I'm like, Mom, taking a
Yeah.
brand new bed with me everywhere, the sunk cost fallacy is going to be hammering my brain every day.
Yes.
I'd rather
Yes.
just buy a used mattress wherever I go, buy a foam
Yeah.
topper, throw it on top, makes it brand
Yes.
new,
Yes.
and then if you ever need to move, you can just get rid of it. And it's like, whatever, I didn't
Yeah.
invest $1,000 into this bed, so I'm okay with selling it.
100%. 100%, man.
So please,
100.
Darcy, go call my mom and tell her that.
Yeah, I'll
She won't
tell
listen
her.
to me.
You no, but it's you're when you're saying all this, it's reminding me of a story one time. So far before I moved, I started being minimalist. Like I was telling you, I moved out of that 3 bedroom apartment. I moved into a studio, had like very few stuff intentionally. I'm like, screw this. And that kind of, allowed me to like, I guess maybe ease into this lifestyle. But I was helping a friend move once. He's like, yeah, they bought a new place and he was moving out of a condo. And I was like sick to my stomach, not literally, but like, in my head, sick to my stomach on the amount of stuff that this guy had. His studio was full of stuff. He was married and stuff, had a kid, and they're moving to like a bigger house, like a big, big house. And then we move everything. And then after, like, oh, this is it. He's like, no, we got to go to my grandma's house. Like, I have stuff stored there. I'm like, what? Like, what could you possibly have stored there? We go into his grandma's house, into the basement of stuff that he hasn't used in ever, just collecting it. And we moved so much stuff into his basement, into some storage thing that he's never going to use, and just let's collect. And it was like old stuff, like, my PS1 with all the games. Okay, maybe that's a collector's item, but just to give you an idea, like stuff like that. Like
Sure.
I would probably keep that. Like you had a nice collection at some point that might have some value, but it was other stuff too, boxes and boxes and old this and old that. And I was like, it was like in that moment, I reflected back, like when I was like 15, 16, I did like moving for a summer where you moved, like furniture into people's houses and stuff. We have so much stuff, man. It's insane. Like I always wonder if the world ended, like, or let's just say people just disappeared, right? And like you're one of the few people left. How fun it would be going through people's houses and seeing the stuff that they've collected, because we have so much stuff. It's unbelievable how much stuff, just things that we have. None of them which what we need. Like it's like, this is just, I'm talking about just other things, like just crap. Not like the things that help us. Hey, we open up a can, we have a can opener. Cool, we need to eat,
Yeah.
right? But it's insane, man. And like I just remember this, and like and this again is, it's, and the reason why it stands out so much, because obviously like complete contradiction to the way I want to live my life and the way I live my life, right? Is collecting stuff. No, get that stuff away from me. I want no part of all this shit. Leave me alone. And when I go into people's houses, the one thing I say is the bigger the house, the more rooms you have, the more stuff you need to fill it. And so I don't blame people for having stuff. But if you buy a 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom, six, whatever house, you have a full basement, living room, you're not going to leave it bare. What the
No.
hell would you do that for? But the I think the bigger argument here is, outside of for like investment like reasons, people buy houses that are far too big for them all the time. And then they
Oh
just have
yeah.
rooms that they never use ever. Like it's like, yeah, we go in here like twice a year. It's just sitting there. It's like, yeah, we bought all this stuff for it. For what? Just cause, But I get it. I mean, here in Winnipeg it's a little different, but I think just generally that's like a reflection of our culture. Because you go to other places, it's not necessarily the case.
No, no, no. I would say it's almost like you could apply Parkinson's law, but in terms of space, like the amount of space that you have is how much stuff you're going to get to make sure that that space is adequately filled.
Exactly. Exactly. It's exactly it. It's 100% that. So if you have a room, then you're only going to have so much stuff you can put in a room, right? You live in a studio, you're just going to fill up your studio and that's it, right? So I think to be a minimalist, it's hard to have like a large property. You can do it, but it's harder because you're going to want to fill stuff. You don't want to fill space. That's what we do as humans, right? You have to find a need for everything. So.
I mean, one of the not to tell a morbid story, but
But I'm going to tell
like
them more of its story.
but I'm going to tell a morbid story. So what somebody who I grew up with that was he's a good friend, and he was my age, and he passed away like unexpectedly, very, very, like no one expected it. It was just like the most random thing that ever happened, and everyone was like crushed and shocked. And I think one of the the most bone chilling parts of the story to me was when one of my best friends, he talked about, yeah, like we went to his house and we went up to his room, and because he was he loved collecting items around like movies and things that he watched, and like there was just piles and piles of things just left there, because it wasn't like you're an 80-year-old person, you pass away naturally. It's like you've passed away, no one
Yeah.
expected it, and now there's just a treasure trove of things that are left behind that your parents have to disperse, sell, keep in a box. Like, what do you do? And the reason why I bring
Yeah.
up that story is because you talk about if we all just disappeared, or even like, I know a lot of people who love going down the rabbit hole, searching through abandoned buildings or whatever, and whether it's in
Love
Europe
that.
or rural
Yeah.
prairies or something, like it makes you realize like how much stuff do we have that we don't need? Like, you're gone. What of this did you take with you? And
Yeah.
it's not to
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that buying
Exactly.
stuff is bad or you shouldn't enjoy yourself, because obviously, again, the flip side of that is you are only here for so long. You might as well enjoy it while you are here. But how much, and I think this is just like a general concept that a lot of people in their 20s, I think, struggle with, is like this idea of keeping up appearances and keeping up with the Joneses, and they have to portray these images of having wealth or affluence. And I'm like, man, when you go to other countries, like you just realize how little people have and how much we take everything in our lives for granted. And I know that that's like a
Man.
huge overarching thing that you could have like an entire podcast dedicated to what we're just talking about, like an entire show just about minimalism. But when I was in Portugal, for instance, people's houses super tiny and they felt like they had more than they needed. Fiji, people literally living in, we went to remote villages you can only access by a boat. And people there were so happy, like them having a DVD player from like 2003. Like Friday night was a
Yeah.
scene. You could,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
kids come back from the other village because their village is too small by boat. They watch like Lilo and Stitch on DVD, and that's like the greatest Friday night of all time. And people here are like, oh man, like I need this monthly subscription and that monthly subscription because I need to, pay off my Roku TV and a smart TV and 6 microwaves. And I'm like, man, like just experience things. Like, please, like you talk about like when you go and experience other cultures and travel, and this is something I know that I can even get down a rabbit hole about is like authentic cultural experiences versus just being the ignorant tourist who's a glutton that goes there to indulge in all the things they can do at home, but just with nicer weather. Like, you just realize how much you have and how amazing your life is if you just went and saw the average living setting for any human being anywhere in the world. Throw a dart anywhere on the map you want.
Yeah.
The average life that someone lives there, you look like a member of the royal family compared to them.
Yeah. Yes. 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 No, that's well said. That's super well said. It's funny you mentioned cars in Winnipeg. So I spend like right now I'm in Winnipeg and I'll come like here for 3 weeks, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm traveling and doing all this stuff with the basketball team, 3x3 team. So I'm coming and going. I'm going to Victoria on the 28th. I'll be gone. Then I'll be gone for 6 weeks. When I come back home, I don't have a car. And I intentionally do that because before I go into this whole thing, like I'll use like my mom, like, hey, let me use your car once in a while, right? If I need to do something that's far, I take the bus and I have no problem with it. And that's because of the travels and stuff that I've done. Like I've sat on buses in Costa Rica, no air conditioning, so hot, like all this stuff. Like I traveled from a bus from like the coast to the capital in San Jose in Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, in Costa Rica, and it was literally a 10-hour bus ride. There's no bathroom on the bus, man. Like it stops twice. There's no bathroom. There's no air conditioning. Nothing. You're sweating. And so when I come back here, I'm like, well, I could rent a car. It's going to cost me money, but it's also a hassle. I have to worry about it being okay, locking it, etc. So like if I really need a car, I'll rent one, or I'll just like, hey, can I use someone's car? If I need to like do something that just requires it, other than that, I'd take the bus. It's super easy. I just walk there. I love walking. I walk everywhere now too.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Just walk. Like literally walked 40 minutes. 2 days ago, I walked somewhere. I went the long way intentionally, like around the river, and then walked back. And it was an hour both ways. I went to the Forks, did some work. I'll take the bus, go to the gym. But if I lived here and before I left, I would look at that behavior and be like, I'm never doing that, right? And if I lived here year round, I would never do that in the winter. So let's be clear about that. But having the perspective that you've just talked about allows me to be completely humble with the fact that I'm just getting on a bus. Whereas you brought up 20-year-olds, a 20-year-old who grows up here looks at someone who rides the bus and like thinks less of them, right? And fair, you're 20, you want a car, you want to go with your friends. I get it, like different lifestyle, different perspective. But there is something to be said about not feeling like you have to do something. I have to get a car. I must, like it's imperative because I'm going to look a certain way. I'm not going to be perceived at bringing some form of value to this world or anything like that. So I know that's easy for me to say, being that I'm not 20 anymore. I'm not even close. And a 20-year-old's like, yeah, I'm trying to get girls. I need a car, man. What are you talking about? But you can always just rent a car. Like you need a car, you have money, you can rent a car, So I say all that to say I'm not talking people out of getting cars, but my perspective is completely flipped around things like that. And kind of how people perceive me, A, not caring, but B, realizing exactly what you said. Like most people, they don't need those types of things to be happy. You can just be happy, just, live your life and go about what you're doing. Those other finer things are kind of like cherries on top, in my opinion. So
you need to make sure to change the language that you're using. And I think that's one thing I've really thought about in the last
Mm,
year is every single day, you can even see right here, my notepad, I write down get to do Monday,
yes, yes, yes,
get to do Tuesday.
yes.
And if you're in the self-help space, or if you've ever picked up, any books in this category, you'll hear a lot of these things, but
Yep.
I also am not ignorant in thinking that it's common knowledge for everybody. It's not, right? Like
Mm-mm.
if it was, then we wouldn't be having these issues. And you talk about getting on the bus, like man, in Fiji, like this is their air conditioning on the bus, like no windows. That's it. And the bus, every bus you see everywhere it's going across the whole country is full. It's not like you're in
Yes.
Winnipeg, you're taking the 26 down Inkster and like it's only full at 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. when people are coming and going from work.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's full all the time. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, it's just, yeah, man, it's so easy to take for granted, like being able to buy a car and have these things. And I remember even when meeting people in Portugal and asking them about like, oh, is it expensive to live here? And I'm coming from the perspective of someone that makes the average money of a Canadian, right? And they're like,
Mhm.
oh, it can be very tough and it's not easy, and a car is like 16,000 or euros. I'm like, that's nothing in my mind.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, I was like, like this is like living in Winnipeg. But then I remember I went golfing, something that's very, very uncommon there because again, it's rich people sports. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to find it you're not going to find an abundance of that in the Azores. I'll say that. And so I met this guy who was a worker there, like just did maintenance like I'd done at 5 golf courses. I know the maintenance golf course life very well. And I asked him, I'm like, how much do you get paid like to do your job? And I was asking him these questions about living here. And he said to me, he started speaking English. He's like, why would you want to live here? And I was like,
Really?
what? I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, dude, this place is amazing. He's like, we get paid 700 euros a month. It's barely enough for me to take care of myself. And I can just make money to eat and live. And that's it. Most people there, and in a lot of places in the world, like this is a continuous theme. They don't ever really leave their country, even if they, especially if they're on an island, but even if they live in a landlocked place, like they don't really leave. Most people in the world make barely enough money to just survive and eat. So when he was saying to me, why would you ever want to live here? Like almost as if it was depressing. I was like, man, this guy thinks that his life is like not that fun. But the way that I see it from where I come from is like, this is all you'd ever want. You can walk everywhere. The nature is beautiful. The weather, maybe it's not Winnipeg winters. It's not like 30 degrees all year like Costa Rica, but the weather is manageable all year. It's very easy to get anywhere. People are nice. It's not that expensive. What more would you want? I
Mm.
remember saying that to one of my friends. I'm like, man, I would consider living in the Azores when I'm older. He's like, you got to make sure they got, uh, but does Amazon ship there? You got to make sure that Amazon ships there. And I'm just like, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Like they have their own version of things there. You don't actually need Amazon. You
Yeah.
want Amazon's convenience. You
Yes.
don't need it,
Yes. Yes.
right? And probably the most mind blowing, like this to me was just like I couldn't wrap my head around it. When we were taking the boat up the river to that village in Fiji that's super, super remote, the guy said to me, he was in the back, who was like
Mhm.
driving the boat. He was like, yeah, man, I've always wanted to go to America. And I was like, dude, you literally live in the middle of like a lush green jungle that has amazing weather all year.
Mhm.
And people are nice. The food, the fruits are so fresh, and all these sorts of things. He's like, I want to go see the Empire State Building. And I was like, man, fuck the Empire State Building. You literally live in Jurassic Park. Who cares about the Empire State Building? Look on Google, bro. Look on
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
But I think all this to say is like, we always want what we don't have.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's just such a hard thing to wrap your head around mentally. And you talk about like getting ahead in your 20s and trying to develop strong habits and mindset, like, do you struggle with this concept of wanting what you don't have?
Mm, yeah. That's like that's a tough one, man. I think we all do, right? To a certain extent. I think there's levels. What you brought there with the notepad, and you're like, I get to. I think that those the reason why those things work is because they put you in perspective, like your perspective changes, right? You're like, oh no, like I'm grateful, right? It's this gratitude practice. And when you do practice that a lot, you're not in that state of feeling like you need something to be fulfilled because you realize I already have it. I have these things, right? And then maybe you don't, then you can go get them. But I think like it's just not like it's not hollow. Like the stuff that you're grateful for are like real things. And so the only thing that I think I definitely feel like the grass is greener is actually just finding like that next experience, right? That next, I'm not gonna lie, like the reason why anyone would do this is because there's a certain level of excitement that comes with finding out about a new culture. And this, like just the small things, like something about like the way they eat food, or like this is a thing. This is food. I didn't even know this existed. And it's just like I can only imagine if they had like things connected to my brain just to watch all the dopamine and all that. I'm like, oh my God, like you're on this high, especially when you first get to somewhere new. And so I'm not gonna lie and say like I don't like seek that out. Clearly I do. That's why I live this lifestyle. But I think the biggest thing is when you decide kind of how you want to live your life, and you have a certain level of control, and you're in the place you want to be, the downsides of like the negative things, or the quote unquote things that would be negative, aren't negatives, because you realize that's the cost to living the life that you want to live, right? And so someone who wants to be a family man doesn't necessarily complain that like they don't get to travel a lot. If like they have young kids and it just doesn't make sense to their family, they're just so grateful that they wanted this. I wanted a family. I wanted to have these kids. I wanted to be married. I want to live in this place, and I'm doing all those things. Then you're not going to necessarily think the grass is greener on the other side. You might want a vacation once in a while, but it's a different feeling than like wanting something that you don't have, versus just being like, yeah, I need a vacation. Like it's we need to have a little break, and that's different, right? Than being like always feeling like you're like, oh, like yeah, it's better here, it's better here, it's better here, this is better, that's better. Because that's coming from a place of just like like emptiness is probably the best way to say it, right? You're like lacking something, you're just trying to put something in there. And then whereas like if you've designed your life and decided the way you want to live and understand the cost of it, you don't have that same feeling. So you still might desire things, but it's not as a lack of like feeling like there's something missing.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our time, so I did want to ask a few fun questions here just before we go. And there are
Let's do it.
questions that have been burning in my mind, always to ask you about traveling and stuff. I know that you, like myself, love learning languages and appreciate that gateway to communication with other people. If there was,
Big time.
besides English, three languages that you could know with perfect fluency and you can never learn another language outside of that for the rest of your life, what would those three languages be?
Well, I mean, that's easy because you just pick the ones that you can travel the most with, right? So like for
Yeah,
me,
that's okay.
uh it's obviously Spanish, right? Because crap, like you can go so many different places. Um the other one, I think most people speak it, but it's not on my list. But you'd think it would be Mandarin. But no shade to any Chinese people out there. I've been there many times. It's not necessarily a culture that interests me too much. Although I know there's a part of it that's probably amazing. I've just not seen it. But for sure, it would be for sure Spanish. And you say not English, like you're not including
Yeah, outside
like
of
these are
English,
additional languages, additional
additional to
languages.
what you to speaking
Okay, so I
English.
already speak French, so that's out. So I'm good
Yeah.
there. The next ones would probably be since I already started studying Japanese, it would be Japanese. I love that country, and would love to be able to explore it in complete fluency because they're a very closed culture. Um, and then the last one would probably be I'd probably throw something like wild in there, like Swahili or something. Just like something that's like super rare. Like, why do you speak Swahili? Like, don't worry about it. So yeah, so those are my choices: Spanish, Japanese, and Swahili.
What are three countries that you would really love to travel to that you haven't been to yet?
Oh man. So Colombia is one. I've heard just great things just across the board from the nature perspective, people, cities, whatever. It has a bit of everything. That's one. One that I haven't been to. Oh, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan.
I've
Yeah.
heard Pakistan's one of the most underrated places to travel to. Obviously, people talk about like danger and threats, but
Yeah.
man, like danger and threats exist everywhere. And some places it's just a bit higher in
100%.
volume.
100%. I watch this travel blogger. I know these are quick questions, but I'll answer quickly. Travel blogger, and he goes all over the place. And he went to Pakistan, and he literally said that, like, he's obviously showing you all the experiences, but like people just invite you in. Like I know this happens in a lot of places in the Middle East. They're like, hey, like come in and just I'm just gonna feed you, or like have tea with me, like just because. And he'd be up in these like mountainous areas, and they'd just be like, hey, like where are you from? Like come in. They don't even speak English. They're just like just trying to show this guy a great time. And he's like, what the hell? And he's like, I can't even speak to them. Like they don't speak English, but he's just it's just they seem so hospitable, so kind. In the, again, so yeah, I would love to go to a place like that. And it's so different. I really want to experience different culture. You travel to other places, you're very like Western, you're like, this isn't so different. I
Yeah,
want
you
that
want
like,
something. I feel like it's like
yeah,
it's misunderstood, like I think Pakistan's like very
yes.
misunderstood.
Big time, big time. So I'd love to go there. Yeah, yeah, and I would say the same for Saudi Arabia. Like I used to teach at English school and had tons of Saudi students. And yeah, they're like, come out here, we'll take care of you. They're just really cool guys, like all the guys I met there. And so I'd love to go there as well.
Uh, three most underrated countries you've traveled to.
That's easy, man. Slovenia is number one. Um, no one talks about Slovenia, man. I've brought this up with someone else, and they were like, oh, "Yeah, it's crazy, right?" And it's unbelievable. It's fresh air, beautiful, just clean, like just such a nice place. So beautiful. Um, Other underrated ones. Let me think real quick here. I forget about a lot of the places I've been, to be honest with you, especially the ones for work. Underrated. Crap. It's a tough one, man. Slovenia is always number one on the list, though. I mean, this isn't necessarily underrated, but a place I think people should go check out is South Korea. Sorry, I want to go to North Korea as well. That's on my list of places. Not to support their
No,
dictatorship,
for
but
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just because, yeah, like it's just so wild. But then yeah, so I would say South Korea, definitely go check that South Korea. Oh, Malaysia. Malaysia's unbelievable, man. Malaysia's unreal. Like what a combination of culture, man. They have a strong Indian culture, Chinese, and then the Malay culture, and they all like live there together. The food is crazy because they have the Chinese and the Indian food. It's great, really, really cool place.
Final question. If you were to look back and tell 20-year-old Darcy something about how to live a simpler life, what would you tell him?
To how to live a simple life.
How to live a simpler life, or just any piece of advice that you could tell 20-year-old Darcy.
Um, 20-year-old me, I don't know. I was like really, really young, man. Maybe like 25-year-old. I don't know, man. Like that's always an interesting question. I think the better, because then I start thinking about myself, right? And
Mhm.
I stopped asking people that question because the question you really want to ask is like, or maybe you don't, but it's, what would you tell a 20-year-old in your position, or a 25-year-old in your position? But I think the big thing is maybe just be intentional about what you want in life. I think that's the number one, probably like the biggest lesson I have um is what is your intent, and then just act upon it. Right. So what do you want? Because a lot of times people say they want something, but they're living their life completely out of alignment with that thing that they say they want. So that doesn't make sense, right? And I think a lot of young people do that, right? So I think that's probably what it is be intentional um in what you're doing. When you decide that you want something, like that's what your focus is on, and go about living your life to acquire that thing, or to live that lifestyle, whatever it may be.
Yeah, well said, man. Well said. No, it's been a lot of fun. I know we could chat like for 100 hours if we really wanted to about all these
For
topics,
sure,
but
for sure.
I think it's just important to like this idea of living simpler in whatever way that is, I think is just so massively underrated. And you are literally the first person that comes to mind when I think of someone who embodies that so well, even if not perfectly, but as consistently as possible. And I think that a lot of people can learn a lot of things from just living a simpler life, especially when you're in these development years, your 20s,
Yeah.
and you don't want to get lost in the sauce of trying to flex on people that don't care about you.
Yes, yes, great. Like you use the word sauce. I love it. Lost in the sauce. Such a great little phrase there. But no, I appreciate it. This is good. And like I said, I could definitely talk about this stuff forever. I know you can as well, as you're kind of going down this path yourself. So I love it. I love it. I appreciate the time to chop it up and talk about this stuff.